Okay, here we are back. It's actually been like 3, maybe even 4 days. I would have liked to demold this at the 24-hour point, but I destroyed my back and I've been laid up for a couple of days. So here we are, like 3, 4 days later. As you can see, it's pretty far along in the curing process here. It was all I could do just to come out and spray it down with a water bottle every now and again, just to kind of moist cure this to make sure that we're getting the proper strength achieved with our mix. This is the heaviest piece I've built in ages, and my back hurts a lot. So it's going to be hard to move this thing around. It's really not that heavy. Like, it's really not that heavy. But it's not light either. And you want to be careful because you don't want to damage it. You don't want to drop it, have any kind of like force impact. And the surface hopefully will be very smooth, but is also still curing, and it's still susceptible to damage, very much so. So like, let's say I demold this thing and it's sitting on the top, which it shouldn't be, and I kind of dragged it towards me, you're going to scuff up that surface for sure. I mean, maybe there's ways that you can fix it, but we poured this upside down on purpose to make our life easy, to have a really smooth, consistent tabletop without having to do a bunch of sanding and exposing to get that flat, smooth surface. So as I demold this here, just going to go step by step, try to remove all the pieces that we put together. There's a bunch of different steps between now and when this is finished. I'm not really going to do too much right now in terms of finishing details, but I do want to just kind of clean up this bottom edge here. Once I flip this over, if I have some, concrete that's hanging off the edge or making a small lip, it's going to crack for sure. And maybe it cracks in a way that I don't want it to, like it takes a chunk out or something like that. So better to kind of clean up this edge now before I flip this thing over and, put a lot of force on this edge. I'm not going to be able to just lift it, turn it, and drop it, so I'm going to have to rely on putting it on edge and leverage and stuff, so I don't want to break anything off. Just very quickly going to use a rasp or file. If you have any aggressive grinding that you need to do to the bottom side here, like perhaps you didn't get it as level or as you were hoping to, you would really want to do this before the like 4-day point, because this is getting pretty hard here. But like if we had done it at maybe 24 hours, it would have been a lot easier to kind of shave down some spots that are too high, something like that. At this point, I would recommend using a diamond cup. That's professionally what a concrete worker would use to grind down and expose a smooth and level surface. They're pretty dangerous to work with, not something that you should just have a go at if you're not comfortable. It's like on an angle grinder, and it has a lot of torque behind it, and you gotta hold on to it, and it's very dangerous, absolutely. But that, professionally speaking, is how you would deal with something like this. If you don't want to deal with that, get some sandpaper, 100, 200 grit, something like that. Give it a couple passes here, and that's kind of what I'm going to do. Just for me, take a flat edge and take off some of the chunks. Little 220 grit sandpaper. Not going for a finished detail here. This is just to knock off the worst of the worst high points so that I can flip this thing over without causing any damage. Okay, let's start taking this mold apart here and see what the surface looks like. I'm really excited to see it. I'm a little worried. I think I used too much black pigment, and brushing it in the way that I did, I'm worried that we're going to end up with a tabletop which is almost entirely black, which is not what I was going for, especially because our base here is so light in color. That being said, of course, I intend to paint this anyway. It would just mean that I would probably do a little bit more of a heavy hand, darker paint job on this if the surface is too dark, but we'll see what it looks like. I don't want to get too far ahead there. We'll just strip it apart very carefully. Again, the surface of the table is still fresh, still curing, and we don't want to damage it because in theory it's going to be flat and smooth. So do be careful to not drag or pull it too much. Shouldn't be too hard because the thing's really heavy, so it just wants to stay there anyway. So I'm just moving that silicone bead out of the way there. I am not prying, because if you do that, for sure you're going to dig gouges into the side of the table here. okay so far. I could probably already break it free and pull it forward, but I'm going to try to remove one more piece of foam here. I hope it looks good. Oh, look at that. Just lifted right off there. Now all I need to do is lift it and turn it without dragging it to whatever extent I'm able to. There we go. Broken free now. This is not fair for me to see it, not you. One sec. Almost there. Let's talk about it. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I wish it were a little bit less heavy on the dark color, a little bit stronger on the light coloration, but I don't hate it. I have a small amount of visible honeycombing. It is a very small amount, but for a tabletop, it's a lot. I wanted none. There's a little bit. And you know, I'm only pointing that out because I don't want to hide behind the camera lens and, you know, not talk about a deficiency that I can clearly see, and maybe you can as well. And maybe if I talk about it, then you can learn something from that. Maybe you saw how much vibration I did, so that can kind of, you know, show you what will get you, I'd call this 95% good. My transition edge here is really nice in some spots, not so nice in other spots. And I want to be careful about doing too much rasp work, because this is very, I mean, even though it's kind of worn down, it's a little aggressive for that. So I'm going to take off like a tiny amount, but then I would want to rely on a decently fine sandpaper like 220, nothing more coarse than that. But here's an important note. This is still only a couple days old. It's very strong. But in terms of sanding or filing to a fine finish, you cannot do that yet. You need to let that cure. The reason why, we have cement component and we have aggregate, which is sand. I want the sand part to file clean or sand down, and what will end up happening instead is that the cement component is not strong yet, and so I will just end up tearing that grain of sand right from the grasp of the cement, as opposed to the cement holding it tightly as I cleave the top off and expose the aggregate. So that's why you can't really get a fine finish at this point, and other than some just rough shaping, I'm not going to even make an attempt to try to get this any smoother yet. If I want to try that, I have to let it cure first. It's really not very bad at all. I mean, again, for a table, I want perfection, but I think I will do just a little bit of sanding on this edge, but it's going to be a month from now. Okay, so that gives me a rough shape there. If I want it any smoother or any better detail than that, I'm going to have to wait until the cement is fully cured so that I can get a finer, smoother finish. I'm not unhappy with that. That's pretty good there. Now it's worth noting, this will look different when it's wet, so why don't we take a look, see what that's going to look like. First of all, look at the cement component here, or the base component. It gets a lot darker when it gets wet. So that means, first of all, just when it rains on it, it's going to look darker. But you could also use wet look sealers to enhance that coloration. And that's something that I will be doing as part of this process, is once I paint this, I'm going to want to use a sealer which helps to, you know, it's not maybe to that degree, but it does the same thing. And it really helps to enhance the differentiation of color and add depth of character. But again, interested to see what this one will look like when it's wet here. Okay, I really like that. I hope you like that as much as I do. I think that looks really fun. It is much darker up top. We'll paint the bottom. The two will match better, and this is going to look fantastic as a finished product. I could paint the top as well, but I don't want to, and there's a couple of different reasons why. One, it's the top. It takes all the UV damage and all the scuffs, you know, any kind of damage you're going to have, this is where you're going to have it. So if I do a superficial paint, something just on the surface layer, chances are it's going to wear off, and over time it's going to look uneven, and just the whole thing's going to look bad. This integral color will never wear off. This tabletop could wear down in thickness by half, and it's still going to essentially look like this. Well, maybe not quite that much, obviously an exaggeration, but the point is, with an integral mix, you're not worried about surface layer damage, because this color is through the thickness of the concrete itself. It's absorbed through the surface layers. In addition to that, This surface is very rough and it will absorb the paint process very well. This extremely smooth surface doesn't really absorb paint very well. You can see in ways like the water beads up just a little bit because of how smooth this surface is. And when you're painting, that's not really a good thing. You could paint it if your heart was set on it, that you would just have to do extremely light layers, long time in between to dry, and then maybe look into some sort of epoxy layer sealer on top that you can really provide some physical protections for the surface. But I want something that's going to be rough, rugged, not take damage. I want to put it in my backyard for 15 years, and 15 years from now I want it to look like this, and this one's gonna. So that's what's good about this one. It's overbuilt, and I do like the surface here. Once we get the base painted, I think this thing's gonna look really good. I think it looks great, especially because I haven't made this before. This was just something that I kind of was thinking would work. A one-piece pour, nice and thick, super thick. Like this could be thinner. Let's be realistic. This is as thick as a paving stone, like a real paving stone you'd use in your backyard. And as far as tabletops go, that's pretty overkill. I'm not worried at all about that cantilever. I'm quite sure that I could stand on this edge. I don't want to. I don't want to break it, especially because it's still new. But I think that the final weight rating of this thing, even though the base is thin, because it has foam inside, which is providing a structural element, it has the lath, which provides a structural element, then you have the mortar application, which is also structural, the thick tabletop. I'm pretty sure without any problem at all, I could put 500 pounds right there, and this thing is going to look exactly fine. I mean, maybe don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I think this thing is made to last. So what do we have to do to this table before we're ready to paint it? Essentially, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the base here with my file and perhaps a standard screwdriver and a little bit of 220 grit sandpaper. And I'm just going to take off some of the imperfections. I'm going to lighten some of the trowel lines which have been left in it. And that's really all there is to it. There's no really wrong way to do it. But before you paint it is the time to make changes. You know, if there's something that you don't like a heavy trowel line or something like that, sand it out now. Once you paint it, you won't even notice that you've sanded that away. It's worth mentioning, if you're going to do anything more than just a little tiny bit of scraping or sanding, go ahead and mask up. You don't want to be breathing all the dust from this. Okay, so here we go. Not finished product, but finished product for now, until this base platform has cured a couple more weeks, and then I can paint it just to kind of marry the coloration of the top to the bottom here. And that's about it. Keep it wet during the curing process, especially during the first week, very important. And it wouldn't hurt now, since I did some sanding on this, you know, take this thing outside, spray it down with the garden hose, really get all that dust off of there. That's what I'll be doing. You can see how thirsty the concrete is. It just absorbs out all that moisture that I give it.